Hi there, my name is Stephanie Callahan and I am a student in the Provincial Instructor Diploma program. Today I am going to be talking about problem-based learning as an instructional approach. Problem-based learning, or PBL as it's called for short, is an instructional approach that is very much in line with the constructivist paradigm. Learning seen through the constructivist lens occurs when the learner is able to reflect on their experience and construct meaning. The constructivist paradigm is student-centered, and the instructor is a facilitator and sometimes a co-learner. I know for me, I learn lots of things from my students, and I'm always surprised at the ideas they come up with, and I feel very privileged that I get to be a co-learner. PBL is a great strategy for constructivist learning, and it encourages discourse and collaboration for better solutions and more in-depth understanding. The PBL approach is usually done in small groups, with the groups coming together to present their findings to the larger group, and more discussion ensues. This encourages the students to co-construct knowledge through productive discourse practices. We'll start by looking at PBL from the learner's perspective. What are the steps used to approach a problem-based learning case study, and what does the process entail? H.G. Schmidt first wrote about the use of problem-based learning in the education of physicians. He envisioned problem-based learning as a 7-step process. The first step is to clarify the concepts not readily understood. So in this step, the group will read over the case study, and if there are any concepts or words that they don't know, then they would clarify these. In step 2, the group would then define the problem. So they'll look at the case study and try to figure out exactly what is the problem that they're trying to solve. And in step 3, they're going to analyze that problem. And this is where they get to brainstorm. They're going to look at the problem, they're going to look at the information that's been provided. They are going to look for things that could influence outcomes that aren't necessarily provided in the case study. And they're going to start to gather lots of different ideas about what the solution may be and about parts of the puzzle that may be missing. In step 4, the group will then draw a systematic inventory of the explanations inferred from step 3. So they'll take a look at the plausible explanations, and they will take a look at the far-fetched ones. Now, they'll never get rid of the far-fetched ones, but they'll focus on the plausible ones. The far-fetched ones may come in handy later because maybe it ends up that they're the best answer. In step 5, the group will then formulate learning objectives. So from step 3 and 4, they may have identified missing pieces. And in step 5, they will formulate how they're going to go about gathering that information. In step 6, they'll actually go and collect the additional information. In this instance, Schmidt has the members of the group going outside of the group to collect the additional information and then coming back. In the classroom setting, we would have the students use their textbooks or go online and look up information. They don't necessarily need to split up. In the final step, step 7, the members will come back and they'll synthesize and test the newly acquired information. So any of the gaps, they go out and they find the information and they bring it back, and they almost start the process over again. So they start constructing what they have, and if they have enough to answer the question and come up with a possible answer. From using the problem-based learning approach, we found that when the learners are faced with similar situations, the knowledge they have derived from the process and the process itself can be applied to the new situation. So at the core of problem-based learning is the ill-structured problem. So these case studies are not the case studies that we would see that have all of the information in them, and we'll learn a bit more about that in the next few slides. Case studies in problem-based learning are often ambiguous, and this is to provoke thought and critical thinking. Gallagher, an author that has written on the process of problem-based learning and has constructed guides for instructions, defines the ill-structured problem as a problem that needs more information to become clear, can be solved in more than one way, has more than one solution, can change with new information, and is ambiguous and unclear. So we find when learners are challenged with ill-structured questions, they're more likely to construct an extensive and flexible knowledge base, to develop effective problem-solving skills, to develop self-directed lifelong learning skills, to become effective collaborators, and to become intrinsically motivated to learn. What more can you ask for? Now that we've looked at the process of problem-based learning and the role of the students, let's look at the role of the instructor. The role of the instructor is to encourage and facilitate discussion. The instructor's role includes keeping the students active in the learning process. So that means going around and checking in with the small groups and making sure that everybody's contributing. Keeping the learning process on track. So if people are starting to talk about their plans for the weekend, sometimes we need to steer them back to the question at hand. Make the students' thoughts and their depth of understanding apparent, and we'll talk a bit more about how we can do that on the next slide. And encourage students to become self-reliant for direction and information. So ways that we can meet the responsibility of our role is by asking open-ended questions, pushing for explanations. So with this, I was a little apprehensive until I read a little bit more about what they mean. And pushing for explanations, you do that when a student comes up with an answer and you want to ask them to explain their answer, and that will create some more discussion and actually get them critically thinking about why they believe that's the answer. We can paraphrase, restate, and summarize. And oftentimes I will do that when we come back into the large group. I will stand up at the board and I will write down the ideas in different columns. Sometimes I will draw arrows and I'll create a conceptual map. And so I like to create visuals, draw diagrams and whatnot. And then once I've got all of the information up on the board, I can check for consensus. Does everybody agree? Do we all think that the answer is the same thing? And hopefully actually somebody will not necessarily agree, and that gets more discussion going. So some of the advantages of problem-based learning include minimal resources, so you don't require a lot to do this. The practice encourages collaboration, and it encourages independent thinking and problem-solving skills. So drawbacks to problem-based learning. Well, there is no definitive answer, so there's no easy way to measure success. And problem-based learning can often create more questions than answers, although I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. So my favorite setting to approach problem-based learning is in the clinical setting. So I am a nursing instructor and I often have students in clinical environments. I can't be with all of the students all of the time, so they are paired up with a nurse and they get to observe things that I'm not there to observe. So I generally have them come together afterwards and we talk a bit about the things we've seen. So in our post-conference, I tend to create a very laid-back, comfortable environment where students feel safe to share, and I'll invite them to share their thoughts and feelings. I especially like it when the student will bring ambiguous questions to the post-conference for discussion. What's great about this is that the classmates, they get the added benefit of learning about something they have not yet encountered but may encounter. My favorite outcome is when a student comes to me and says that the discussion we had in post-conference really helped them in their practice, and it helped them anticipate things. I would highly recommend giving problem-based learning a try, and I think you'll be amazed at the solutions and the questions that the learners generate from this approach, and often it's not what I expected. And thank you all for taking the time to watch this presentation. This is the list of references I used for information, and I would recommend going and looking them up. If you want to try this in your classroom, there's plenty of information online, and I think that you will enjoy the experience.